March 14th, 1968. Phuoc Toi Province, South Vietnam. The jungle is still in the early hours before dawn, heavy with moisture, thick enough that each breath feels filtered through soil and leaves. A 4-man Australian SAS patrol moves through the undergrowth on a slow, deliberate bearing. Their silhouettes are narrow shapes against the deeper black of the forest, each step measured to avoid even the suggestion of noise. Sergeant David Kerr, the patrol commander, raises a closed fist. The column freezes instantly. His ears have registered something the others have not: a soft shifting of weight, a repetition of movement that does not belong to animals. You see him lower himself inch by inch, eyes level with the root system spread like veins across the ground. He listens again. The jungle presses back with silence, but Kerr knows this quiet too well. It is not peace, it is concealment. Behind him, Corporal Ian Reeves checks the safety on his M16, then slowly releases the pressure. The men are deep behind enemy lines, far past the limits, where support could reach them in time. Every sense is sharpened. Every mistake could unfold into a disaster from which no one walks away. Their mission is simple on paper. Observe North Vietnamese troop movement along a narrow infiltration route. But the darkness in this sector always feels heavier, as if the land itself understands how quickly it can swallow a patrol whole. A faint, metallic click ripples through the trees. Reeves hears it first, then Kerr. The sound is out of place in the wild. Something mechanical, deliberate. Kerr turns his head slightly and whispers, barely audible. Contact likely. Hold position. The men sink into the foliage. Sweat gathers at the edge of their brows, even though the air is cool. The silence around them deepens a second time, unnaturally so. Then another subtle sound emerges, synchronized breathing, more than one person, steady and trained. The patrol realizes they are not alone on this trail. They have walked into proximity with a North Vietnamese reconnaissance detachment, perhaps a platoon, maybe more. Reeves slowly raises the handset of the ANPRC-25 radio, but Kerr signals no transmission. Not yet. They cannot reveal themselves. The whole point of SAS doctrine, refined across years of jungle operations, is invisibility. A fight this deep behind enemy lines is not survivable unless it is over before it begins. But the jungle betrays its own secrets in unpredictable ways. A flicker of movement, a silhouette, then a second. Shapes sliding between tree trunks with the controlled cadence of professional soldiers. The NVA are close, maybe 30 meters, maybe less. Kerr watches them through the veil of leaves, noticing the angle of their rifles, the spacing in the file. They are not wandering. They are searching. Something has alerted them. The jungle heat presses down, trapping the tension. One wrong breath, one twig snapping beneath a boot, and an entire firefight will erupt in the dark. Kerr adjusts his grip on his suppressed L1A1, keeping the barrel low but ready. His men shift weight silently, rifles aligned with their fields of fire. None of them speak. None of them blink. The moment stretches long enough that even the cicadas hesitate. A drifting mist settles across the undergrowth, giving the shapes of the approaching soldiers an eerie blurred outline. Kerr feels an old instinct rise, something between anticipation and dread. Recon missions live inside this razor-thin margin where stealth can collapse in less than a heartbeat. Then it happens. A single NVA trooper stops. His head tilts. His foot steps closer to the brush where Reeves is concealed. The patrol senses the shift instantly. There is no more time, no more silence to hide within. Everything they have avoided for days is now converging on their exact position. Kerr's whisper is barely a breath, but it carries the full weight of command. Prepare to break. The next 90 seconds will become one of the most violent close-quarters clashes recorded by Australian forces in 1968. The NVA point man shifts again, his boot sliding across damp soil. The motion is small, but enough to expose the faint arc of his bayonet as it catches the dim pre-dawn light. Reeves tightens his grip on the M16. Kerr inhales, once controlled, ready to trigger the only option they have left. The NVA soldier bends closer. His hand parts a curtain of ferns. For a fraction of a second, his eyes widen, realizing the shape he sees is not vegetation. Kerr fires first. A suppressed crack snaps through the silence. The point man collapses before his rifle can even rise. The forest reacts instantly, as if awakening in shock. The second NVA soldier lunges toward the sound. Reeves fires a 3-round burst, the recoil pushing into his shoulder as leaves burst apart around the target. A third muzzle flash ignites deeper in the thicket as Trooper Miller, covering the rear arc, neutralizes another shape moving fast toward the flank. For a brief instant, the jungle lights with the sharp strobe of gunfire. The NVA platoon responds without hesitation. Their return fire erupts in a violent wall of sound, ripping through vines, shredding bark, showering the SAS patrol with debris. The air fills with the hiss of passing rounds. Kerr feels soil pop beside his cheek as a bullet tears into the ground inches from his face. Shift left, he orders, crawling sideways to force a new angle. Miller rolls behind a fallen tree trunk, firing short, controlled bursts. Reeves sends rounds toward muzzle flashes, each one illuminating silhouettes that appear and vanish in the chaos. The jungle becomes a cage of sound. Every rifle report vibrates in the chest. Every second multiplies into something heavy, stretched by adrenaline. The patrol cannot retreat. Movement risks exposing them to open fire. They cannot stay still. The NVA are tightening a loose semicircle around their position. Kerr switches magazines, the metallic click feeling impossibly loud. He studies the pattern of muzzle flashes. These soldiers are not rushing blindly. They are probing, advancing with precision. Their formation suggests at least a reinforced squad, possibly more. If they manage to complete the encirclement, the SAS patrol will not survive the minute. A grenade arcs through the dimness, its shape barely visible before it lands against a moss-covered root. Kerr reacts instantly, shouting, "Down!" The explosion splits the morning air with violent force. Heat and dirt slam against Reeves' back as he shields his radio set. Shrapnel peppers the trunk above Miller's position, gouging deep splinters. Smoke drifts through the ferns. Visibility tightens. The NVA advance accelerates. Kerr fires again, striking a silhouette moving low across the left flank. Trooper Ward, usually the quietest in the patrol, unleashes rapid bursts to break the rightward push. The sheer violence of the moment forces a paradox into existence. Everything feels both unnaturally fast and impossibly detailed. Each breath, each decision, each reflex stretches the seconds until time feels distorted. They have been in contact barely 40 seconds. Reeves attempts a transmission at last, raising the handset under intense fire. This is Widow 2 troops in heavy contact grid. His words vanish as another NVA volley slams into the trees around him. Kerr yanks him aside just as a round tears through where the radio operator's head had been a moment before. "Forget the grid. Fight it," Kerr says sharply. The jungle trembles again with incoming footsteps. Multiple. Fast. The NVA are charging the center. Miller fires point blank into a figure emerging through the smoke, the impact spinning the soldier backward. Another trooper rushes in immediately after forcing Miller to roll, and fire from his back leaves, spraying upward as brass casings scatter beside him. Reeves reloads breath-ragged hands, shaking from adrenaline. They're pushing hard. Kerr scans the terrain. The semicircle is closing. 90 seconds is approaching fast, and the NVA intend to finish it before support can even be imagined. The SAS patrol prepares for the most critical moment of their survival. Kerr studies the collapsing perimeter with rapid, disciplined calculation. The NVA fighters are no longer probing, they are committing. Their footsteps cut through the undergrowth in coordinated bursts, each element pushing from a different vector. The patrol has seconds before the assault converges. Miller shifts behind the fallen trunk again, firing a short burst that forces two silhouettes to drop. Reeves anchors the radio handset under his chin, hoping to transmit even a partial message. But the gunfire drowns his voice entirely. The static seems to grow louder than the rifle cracks. Ward moves to the edge of a shallow depression, using the lowered angle to deliver tighter groups of fire. His rounds snap through the humid air, shaking loose a stream of leaves overhead. Kerr exhales once steadying his mind. He knows small patrols survive by disrupting momentum, not matching force. He signals a maneuver with two fingers, sharp and downward. Ward nods. The move is dangerous, but hesitation will cost them everything. Ward pivots, firing a controlled burst to the left flank. It's enough to pull attention for half a second. Kerr then rises just high enough to throw a smoke grenade downslope. It clatters against roots, rolling into the thickest brush. A growing cloud begins to form pale and swirling masking shapes and confusing depth perception. For the NVA, the sudden blur fractures their advance. For the SAS, it creates the narrowest window of possibility. Shift right. Now Kerr orders. The patrol moves low and fast, sliding across the terrain like shadows under broken light. Reeves drags the radio against his chest. Miller covers the movement each burst, cutting a precise rhythm to deter pursuit. Ward shifts his aim, responding to the dim pulses of muzzle flashes. The smoke thickens. The jungle becomes a labyrinth of silhouettes. The NVA fire intensifies their rounds, slicing through the veil of vapor. The SAS patrol can read the shift. The enemy believes the Australians are pinned and attempting a desperate retreat. They tighten the semicircle even more aggressively. Kerr listens. He hears the cadence of boot falls from the left, fast and determined. Another team is closing in. To the right, more cracks of rifles echo, overlapping in a way that suggests flanking movement. The pressure is growing from all sides. Reeves finally manages the transmission. Widow 2 in heavy contact. Multiple elements. Grid uncertain. A burst of static follows. It is unclear if anyone hears it. But the attempt buys him a breath of courage. Miller suddenly shouts, "Movement right." Kerr swings his rifle. Through drifting smoke, he sees 3 NVA soldiers advancing in a staggered line, rifles raised. Their pace is quick, confident, expecting to trap a broken patrol. Kerr fires, first striking the lead soldier. Ward's rifle follows with 2 shots that force the second man to drop. The third lunges forward, firing wildly. Reeves flinches as a round grazes a tree inches from his helmet. Miller steps into a clearer line and fires a tight burst that ends the charge. The clash lasts less than 5 seconds. The effect is immediate. The jungle falls into a momentary vacuum of noise, as though the forest itself is absorbing the violence. But the silence doesn't hold. Other NVA fighters shout commands in Vietnamese, their voices echoing from multiple directions. The smoke has confused them, but not slowed them enough. Kerr moves to the front of the formation, establishing a new anchor point. He inspects the slope ahead, a narrow corridor of ferns and exposed roots leading deeper uphill. It's risky, but it stretches across terrain that will force the NVA to funnel their pursuit into narrower lines. That gives the patrol a fighting chance. "Follow me." "No stops," he whispers. The men move each step, gripping soft earth, each breath shallow. Gunfire erupts behind them again as the NVA recognize the shift. Rounds tear through the smoke, hissing past the patrol, snapping branches, punching into bark. Reeves shouts. They're closing fast. Kerr turns as he advances uphill, firing 3 shots to force back a pursuing element. The recoil shakes his arm, but his pace never slows. The patrol ascends the slope in a controlled rush. Leaves whip against their sleeves. Sweat stings their eyes. Somewhere behind the NVA force reorganizes for another push. The 90-second mark is nearly behind them, but the fight is not finished. They have escaped the worst of the circle, yet the jungle is far from letting them go. Kerr reaches the crest of the small rise and signals the patrol to flatten against the terrain. The slope gives them a temporary advantage. The NVA must climb upwards, slowing their advance and exposing their silhouettes against the dim light that filters through the canopy. It is not enough to end the fight, but enough to break the momentum of the assault. Reeves lifts the radio again, voice tense. Widow 2 still in contact, attempting to reposition. Static floods the channel, drowning his words. The treetop humidity disrupts everything. Kerr grabs Reeves's shoulder, urging him to stay low. A single bullet whips overhead, slicing a vine and sending it falling like a severed rope. Miller takes a knee beside a tree trunk, aiming downhill. Through the faint haze, he sees shapes moving quickly, tightening formation. They are disciplined, well coordinated, and using hand signals rather than shouting now. They intend to finish what they started. He steadies his breathing, timing his shots with the rhythm of their advance. Engaging, Miller says. 3 bursts follow. One silhouette drops instantly, another stumbles behind a root, and a third slips back into cover. Ward adds supporting fire from a slightly higher angle, each shot carving through trunks and branches to stall the enemy's climb. Kerr scans the terrain ahead. The ridge continues for about 30 meters before sloping downward into another thick layer of vegetation. If they can reach that point, they may find better concealment. But the NVA are adapting, redirecting some of their fighters to flank around the right, using a narrow shelf of rock as cover. Kerr mutters, "They're trying to box us in again." Ward glances over. Then we hit them before they close it. The air thickens with noise again. The NVA fire increases bursts, echoing between the trees. Fresh muzzle flashes glow behind the smoke, some closer than expected. Rounds pepper the ground, cutting small bursts of soil beside Reeves's elbows. Kerr shifts position, firing 2 shots to halt a pair of advancing soldiers. He sees one fall, the other drop behind a tree. The assault continues to build in pulsing waves. Reeves tries the radio once more. Widow 2, contact ongoing, 4-man patrol, need... A violent surge of gunfire cuts his sentence short. Bark explodes across his face as a round strikes the tree he's using for cover. He ducks instinctively, gripping the handset tight. Kerr moves to him. "If we get pinned here, we're finished. We need distance." Miller fires again from the left flank. They're moving up fast. 10, maybe 12. Ward adds, "More cutting across the right shelf." Kerr's calculation is immediate. They cannot hold this line. Not with these numbers. Not with the enemy maneuvering so effectively. He signals with a sharp downward sweep of his hand. "Break again. 2 bounds. Follow my pace." The patrol springs into motion. They dart across the ridge feet, slipping momentarily on loose soil but regaining balance. Each man moves in short, explosive bursts, stopping only long enough to fire suppressive rounds. Leaves blast apart behind them as NVA fire intensifies, chasing their movement with relentless pressure. Reeves stumbles once but catches himself. Miller covers him, firing toward the flash of an NVA rifle. Ward shifts to intercept a silhouette moving along the rock shelf, firing 2 precise shots that force the fighter to retreat behind stone. Kerr reaches the edge of the ridge and leaps down the opposite side, sliding on his boots as soil carries him into a deeper patch of vegetation. Reeves follows, then Miller, then Ward. The 4 men land hard but stay low, disappearing for a moment into thick ferns. Behind them, the NVA crest the ridge and fire downward, but the angle works against them. Their rounds shred leaves, punch into soft ground, and tear apart saplings, but the patrol is already shifting into new positions. Breathing hard, Kerr wipes sweat from his brow and scans the slope they have descended. "We're going to circle left," he whispers. "Break their line of pursuit." Reeves nods, gripping the radio tight. Miller checks his magazine. Ward inhales deeply, steadying himself. The patrol begins to move again, slipping into the thickened shadows beneath the trees. The sounds of the NVA pursuit follow them like a heartbeat. Branches snap. Orders echo faintly. Footsteps thud rhythmically on the ridge above. The 90-second ambush is over, but the fight born from it is still tightening around them. The jungle is now a maze of danger, and the enemy is refusing to break contact. The patrol pushes deeper into the shadows as the first hints of dawn begin filtering through the canopy. The weak light catches droplets clinging to leaves, giving the illusion of calm, but the forest's tension remains razor-sharp. Kerr halts suddenly and raises a hand. The men freeze. Far behind them, the NVA are adjusting once more. The pursuit has not slowed. It is becoming more coordinated. Miller whispers. They're not letting up. Kerr listens carefully, tracking the echoes. 2 elements still behind us. A third moving left. They're trying to predict our arc. Ward wipes sweat from his cheek, voice low. We'll have contact again soon. Reeves checks the radio battery with trembling fingers. Even if headquarters hears us, they're too far for immediate help. Kerr's thoughts narrow. This mission was meant to be reconnaissance, not an extended engagement. They cannot outfight a force this size. Their survival depends on forcing a break in enemy momentum long enough to vanish back into the terrain. He signals a halt behind a cluster of large twisted roots. The cover is natural dense and angled perfectly to give them firing lanes without exposing their silhouettes. Kerr motions quickly, assigning arcs. The others nod, settling into positions with the calm precision that comes only from years of training. Moments later, the forest trembles with approaching footsteps. Not rushed. Measured. The NVA are now advancing with greater discipline, spacing their formation using cover intelligently. These are not recruits chasing shadows. These are seasoned fighters who understand the difficulty of hunting an elite patrol. Kerr whispers, "Hold fire. Let them close." Miller steadies his breathing, aiming between 2 broad ferns. Ward lowers his rifle slightly, waiting for clearer shapes. Reeves sets the radio aside and positions his M16 firmly against his shoulder. The first silhouette emerges through the dim light. Then another. Their rifles sweep methodically across the terrain. The patrol remains motionless, their bodies pressed into the earth, blending with roots and moss. Kerr waits until the closest soldier steps within 10 meters. Then he fires. The shot strikes cleanly, and the NVA soldier collapses without a cry. Miller fires next, bursting through thick foliage to drop another figure attempting to dive for cover. Ward cuts across the flank, hitting a third silhouette before it can raise its weapon. The jungle erupts in answering gunfire. Rounds tear past Kerr's position, churning soil and blasting bark from a tree. Ward shifts, firing 3 rounds that push back a flanking attempt. Reeves presses deeper into the roots as bullets snap overhead. 1 round grazes the radio handset, leaving a sharp dent in the casing. Kerr assesses quickly. They have seconds before the NVA reorganize and overwhelm the defensive pocket. The patrol must move again, but not blindly. They need a direction that buys time. He signals a shift to the right down a narrow natural ravine partially hidden by vines. It is steep, twisting, and difficult to follow without exact footing. Perfect for breaking pursuit. Move, Kerr orders. The patrol sprints from cover as gunfire intensifies behind them. Rounds pepper the trees, carving sharp echoes throughout the ravine. Miller slips once, but catches himself sliding on damp soil. Ward fires backward while descending each burst, timed to slow the enemy's approach. Reeves grips the radio tight to his chest, its metal casing warm from earlier fire. Kerr reaches the bottom of the ravine and signals another right turn. The jungle here is thicker, tangled with vines and uneven ground. Their movement becomes a controlled crawl, blending back into terrain that favors evasion over confrontation. Behind them, distant shouts rise, followed by the unmistakable sound of regrouping forces. The NVA have not lost the chase, but the ravine has disrupted their formation. Reeves breathes heavily, voice tight. If they regroup again, they'll push straight through us. Kerr nods, wiping sweat from his brow. Then we don't let them. 1 more break. After that extraction zone. Ward looks up sharply. You think we can reach it? If we time the next contact, right? Kerr replies, yes. The patrol adjusts their gear silently. Ahead lies the final stretch of terrain between them and a potential extraction. Behind them, the enemy gathers strength again. The next engagement will determine whether the patrol escapes or disappears into the jungle like so many before them. The patrol moves with renewed urgency, cutting through the dense curtain of vines and thickets. Kerr checks his compass, briefly orienting them toward a narrow ridge that drops into a dry creek bed. If they reach that point, they can follow the winding channel toward an old LZ marked months earlier for emergency. It is not official, not cleared, and barely large enough for a helicopter to risk, but it is the only viable option left. Dawn strengthens overhead, though the canopy still traps most of the early light. The forest floor glows faintly with soft green reflections. The jungle looks calm, deceptive, almost beautiful. None of it matches the violence gathering behind them. A distant shout breaks the illusion. The NVA have reorganized. Kerr raises a fist. Prepare for contact. They're close. Miller breathes deeply, steadying his nerves. How many do you think? Enough, Kerr answers. More than before. The patrol slides down a slick slope and lands in the creek bed. The ground here is packed sand and stone, quieter underfoot. Kerr signals a left turn. They move quickly, hugging the bank for concealment. But the NVA have tracked their shift. Gunfire erupts from the ridge above, bullets cracking into the creek bed. Pebbles spray across Reeves' helmet as he dives for cover. Ward fires upward short, controlled bursts that disrupt the attacking line. Miller joins him, striking a silhouette perched between two tree trunks. The man drops rifle, tumbling from his hands. Kerr studies the angles. The enemy is trying to pin them in the creek bed. Staying here will get them trapped. They must break upward onto the next ridge. He signals sharply. Up and right, Awib. The patrol scrambles up the muddy slope. Boots slide, hands claw at roots. Behind them, bullets carve deep grooves into the bank. A round grazes Reeves's sleeve, ripping fabric but missing skin. Ward helps him over the crest, then turns to fire a burst to halt an advancing soldier. Kerr checks the terrain. The final ridge is only 50 meters ahead. Beyond it lies the emergency extraction point, a barely recognizable clearing marked only by memory and a few scattered landmarks. But 50 meters is a long distance under pursuit. The NVA surge again. Figures rush through the lower trees, closing rapidly. Their coordinated shouts echo through the branches, urging the push forward. Miller fires, dropping one. Reeves adds 2 bursts that disrupt a second wave. Ward hits a third fighter, moving across the flank. But the enemy does not break. They adapt, splitting into 2 assault elements that begin expanding outward in a tightening net. Kerr's pulse sharpens. Last push, go. The patrol sprints toward the ridge. Every footstep feels heavier than the last. Branches whip against their gear. Soil shifts beneath them. Gunfire erupts again as the NVA crest the ridge behind, firing downhill with growing ferocity. Miller stumbles, but Kerr grabs his vest and pulls him forward. Reeves clutches the radio, its weight feeling like stone in his hands. Ward fires backward while running desperate to keep the enemy line from closing. They reach the crest. Kerr's eyes lock on the clearing ahead. It is small, uneven, littered with fallen branches and jagged stones. No helicopter pilot in his right mind would call it safe, but SAS doctrine has never relied on comfort. Reeves drops to one knee and tries the radio again. Widow 2 requesting immediate extract hot zone coordinates, approximate NVA in pursuit. His voice cracks with urgency. Static answers him, then a faint reply breaks through. Widow 2. Copy. Airborne element diverted. 2 minutes out. 2 minutes, in a firefight paced by seconds. Kerr positions the patrol at the edges of the clearing. Hold them. No, fall back. Ward takes the left flank, eyes fixed on the tree line. Miller covers the right, reloading with quick, practiced movements. Reeves stays low at the center, calling updates into the radio between bursts of fire. The NVA appear almost instantly, dark shapes emerging between trees, rifles raised. The patrol fires in controlled, precise bursts. One enemy drops, another falls against a tree trunk. A third dives into cover, firing upward at Ward's position. The jungle explodes with noise. Kerr fires until his magazine empties, reloads, fires again. Miller grits his teeth as rounds tear into the ground near his knees. Ward is forced to shift positions twice, each move tightening the angle of his fire. Then a distant thrum grows in the sky. Reeves shouts, "Bird incoming." The sound swells. Rotors chopping the air, pushing pressure downward until the clearing trembles. A UH-1 Huey rises above the treetops, banking hard, its door gunner already engaging targets below with thunderous bursts. Leaves rip through the air under rotor wash. The NVAs scatter for cover, their disciplined advance breaking as the helicopter descends into the tight clearing. Kerr signals the patrol forward. "Go move." The 4 men dash toward the helicopter. The door gunner lays down suppressive fire as bullets snap across the clearing. Reeves stumbles, but keeps moving, clutching the radio. Miller dives onto the skid, first Ward right behind him. Kerr pushes Reeves upward, then pulls himself into the cabin as the Huey lifts sharply. The jungle falls away beneath them, shrinking into a chaotic blur of green and smoke. Reeves drops against the floor, exhausted. Miller leans his head back, breathing hard. Ward wipes dirt from his face, staring out at the receding treetops. Kerr finally exhales, the tension draining from his shoulders. He looks out over the jungle, a jungle that nearly claimed them in less than 2 minutes. The ambush had lasted 90 seconds. The escape took far longer, but all of it proved one truth that commanders repeated for years afterward. In Vietnam's jungles, survival was measured not in hours or days, but in heartbeats.